Well, there are so many diets out there. One that's really become very popular is intermittent fasting. Now, chances are you know someone who's on it, or maybe you've even tried it yourself. But is it being done correctly, and what are the risks involved, especially when you're not eating for so many hours? Let's ask the expert. Joining me now is Dr. Natasha Bhuyan, National Medical Director for One Medical. All right, explain exactly what intermittent fasting is.
Well, it's periods of partially or fully abstaining from eating, and it's not a very complicated diet, but there are lots of different methods.
Yes.
One of the most popular methods is called the 16-18 method,
Okay.
and that is when you fast for 16 hours of the day and you have an 8-hour eating window. Now, the time that you eat actually does matter. It's better to eat from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then fast otherwise, as opposed to eating from noon to 8 p.m. because if we eat too close to bedtime, that can actually cause weight gain. Now, the other popular method of intermittent fasting is called the 5-2 method, and this is when people eat a regular diet 5 days of the week. But 2 days of the week, they'll reduce their calories dramatically, so 500 to 600 calories on those days. And then there's a couple other methods as well. One method is basically fasting for 24 hours once a week, no eating for 24 hours. And then the really tough method that some of my patients do, it's called the warrior fast. And this is where people will essentially fast for 20 hours a day or have severely reduced calories, so just eating fruits and veggies throughout the day, and then they'll eat one big meal for dinner. And so there's a lot of different methods of intermittent fasting, and we've done some research, but all of them are effective. They're just for different people.
Okay, this is so interesting, and it's, at times sounds so extreme. So what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, there's a lot of pros and cons, and I will always be honest, most diets, they don't lead to sustainable weight loss. That's what we've seen over and over, but with intermittent fasting, it does. That's the surprising thing. Yeah, there's really good research that shows people who do intermittent fasting for 1 year, they end up losing 13% of their body weight. And even after they stop intermittent fasting after 1 year, they don't just gain it all back. They'll gain back a percentage or two, but they don't gain it all back. So this is a really sustainable diet for some people. The other pro is that it doesn't necessarily tell you what to eat, it tells you when to eat. And so it's not a very restrictive diet for a lot of people to try. And then we have seen benefits on lower cholesterol, lower blood pressure, improved memory for some people, so lots of benefits. There are, of course, some cons.
But.
For some people, it is hard to fast. It's hard to avoid eating. When they avoid eating, they get cranky, they get hangry. Yes, they get irritable. People will have other side effects when they don't eat. They get headaches, they're fatigued. For a lot of people, after doing this for about 4 to 6 weeks, those side effects start to go away. Another interesting side effect, though, is the development of gallstones. Now, when people fast, our gallbladder isn't moving as much, so bile can build up. We can develop gallstones. Another weird side effect is actually bad breath.
Okay, I saw that and I was like, why?
Yeah, and the reason why is because our body is burning through fat when we're intermittent fasting, and so that releases acetones, and also when we decrease saliva, that can cause bad breath as well. And then I think the last criticism of intermittent fasting is really this idea of, because intermittent fasting doesn't tell people what to eat, it tells them when to eat, some people go about intermittent fasting and they're just eating hamburgers during
binge.
during
bad food.
there's the fast period and the feast period, and people will feast on unhealthy foods, and that's not really the intent of the diet.
Okay, so don't go all out and think, oh, this is, like nothing can hold me back from eating whatever I want.
A green card for eating what you want. No, that's not what it is.
Okay, so if someone is interested, what are some tips for success?
Yeah, so a couple things I tell people. Number one tip is stay hydrated. So if you start intermittent fasting, make sure that you're staying hydrated, making sure you're drinking 0-calorie drinks throughout the day. We want to make sure that people, don't lose those electrolytes. The other thing is really being mindful. So it is hard to not eat for a long period of time. We're so used to eating, and often eating becomes a habit. It's not because we're hungry, it's sometimes because we're bored. And we talk a lot about mind hunger versus body hunger. So being mindful about what you eat, doing things like meditation, and then when you're not fasting, being slow and thoughtful and pacing yourself so you don't just ravenously eat lots of food is really helpful. We also tell people to stay busy, because if you stay busy and distracted,
you're not thinking about it.
It gets you through those fasting periods. And then I also advise people, when you are eating, make sure that you're reaching for nutrient-dense foods. So when you're eating, go for those healthy calories, make sure we're eating things like eggs, lentils, beans, high in fiber, because those foods will ultimately be filling. And if you eat the right way during the feast periods, you won't have as many cravings during the fast periods.
Okay, but this is not for everybody.
It's not for everyone. So we do say, certainly talk to your doctor before you start trying intermittent intermittent fasting. People who are pregnant certainly shouldn't do this, and I think that's kind of obvious as to why. But even people who are trying to become pregnant should avoid intermittent fasting because, when you fast, it can affect ovulation and it can affect hormones and your chances of pregnancy. And then even with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, we found that intermittent fasting actually has benefits, but type 1 diabetes on insulin, it can lead to periods of really low blood sugar. So you got to be cautious.
Yeah.
And then also people who are frail, elderly, people who have a history of eating disorders, we want to be cautious around this because we don't want to feed into any sort of disordered eating. And then of course children. Children are growing, they need nutrition. Anyone under 18, we say no to this. So talk to your doctor if you're interested.
Yeah, so interesting because you've got valid points on both sides.
Exactly, yeah. And this is one of the diets that actually works and is sustainable for some people.
Surprisingly.
It does, yeah.
Okay, Natasha, thank you.